Howard's Friends by Rebecca Lloyd. All last week, the wind whipped sand up along the beach in great stinging tongues, and straps of flat seaweed got wrapped around the promenade railings like slimy belts. It's calmer now, and Grandad wanders slowly, examining things brought in on the tide. The beach is deserted, so wherever he goes, I can keep him in my sights. In the evenings, we watch the sun slide into the waves like a pale burning plate, and when it's gone, we look at each other, and Grandad says, When's the party going to start? Ever since we left White Lawns, he's been living out some other part of his life, which keeps him docile, and I like it that way, because I don't want any trouble from him. I've got enough money to last us for a while, but no ideas coming, and it's getting towards summer. Whoever owns this beach hut's going to appear one day and want it back. I haven't been mentioned at all in connection with the big day at White Lawns Residential. It's as if I never existed. But Grandad's been reported missing, and the event itself has been described as a natural freak thing, like frogs raining from the sky. The papers say not a single old person got hurt, and Mrs. Duggan Wallace probably had the time of her life with her stick. There was nothing you could put your finger on about White Lawns. Everything was always spick and span, but it was as if there was a conspiracy to persuade the old people to abandon their will to live by surrounding them with everything sort of forlorn. If I close my eyes, I can still see the brick-coloured tea cooling in plastic mugs along the length of the table in the dining room, and the single rounds of thin bread glistening with pale marmalade on heavy white plates. Breakfast laid, Howard. I'm going now, before the dag comes in, Alice, the night shift worker, always said. But she was never quick enough. Our manager, Dagmore, would be there every time as she stepped into the front porch, and whether it was summer or winter, he'd always say, bikini weather, what? And she'd rub away at her itchy, swollen eyes and try to get past him. Usually, Dagmore avoided the olds and headed straight for his office with his head down. When one of them did manage to catch him, he had that special gift of appearing to listen with vigorous interest. At the same time, his eyes would flick along the skirting boards, looking for dust balls. Just run over that bit again, Howard. There's a good chap, he'd murmur at me. It wasn't so much his treatment of us all that fermented my plan, but 3 specific incidents that swelled up from the daily horribleness that Dagmore cast about him, like the shadow of Dracula's cloak. Well, the last of these was the camel that really trod on the straw. Every Saturday, the olds used to stand at the dining room window to watch some kids smoking and kissing on a bench in the park behind White Lawns. They'd get lined up before the kids arrived. They invented lives and thoughts for them, knew all their funny gestures, and who was showing off to who. Even Mrs. Duggan Wallace used to come off her imaginary tennis court and join in. Well, that one's come smart today. She'll be in love with the fat boy there, she'd say. Don't be silly, Mary. The fat boy's her brother. Can't you see the resemblance? Pure coincidence. You'd not hang on to your own brother like she's doing. They're young lovers, those two. Play tennis together, I expect. Bill Humphreys would put his bit in. No, you're both wrong. I was trained in surveillance in the war. It's the tall, greasy boy that's caught the girl's eye, but she's making a play with the fat one to make the greasy one notice her. Grandad Plummer would titter and crane his neck forward. It's the little quiet one that'll get the big fella. Look how she's throwing her head back and smoking nice and slow and not saying anything to anyone. She's the one the big fella's noticed. Well, Dagmore caught him at it one morning on one of his patrols. Usually he'd stay in his office eating biscuits, but every so often and unexpectedly he'd emerge and slide through the rooms, whistling between his teeth with his mouth slack. I heard him the next day on the telephone. What am I reporting? Hooligans out there, sprawled all over the bench, doing lewd things. Young girls in skirts the size of tea towels. Boys wriggling fingers. All of them smoking something. I had my ear pressed against his door. What's that? No, I can't see them personally from my office, no. But my clients are complaining. They're old, very, very old, vulnerable. It's causing quite a lot of upset. Well, the following morning, the bench was removed. Well, then shortly after that, in a moment of mistaken intimacy, Dagmore revealed something about himself so fascinating and repellent that my loathing of him curdled into a new intensity. I'd gone into his office to talk about my wages. He belched cheerfully as I entered. I see you've noticed the scar on my nose, Howard. There's a story behind that. Would you like to hear it? No, it's about my wages, Mr. Dagmore. Over at Peaceful Hills, the caretaker gets £6.50 an hour. Dagmore ran his finger along the side of his shaft-like nose with a gesture of utmost tenderness. Yes, I know the old nose is a bit askew, but I can't complain. Surgeons, very clever people. Do you know what they did? They made this straight cut here down the left-hand side, and flapped the whole thing back, so it was sitting on my cheek like an open trapdoor. Peaceful Hills is a lot smaller than White Lawns, Mr. Dagmore, and the caretaker there, he doesn't have a Mrs. Duggan Wallace laying in wait for him with a stick all the time. I kept my eyes on the clock behind Dagmore's desk. It was the only thing he owned that I fancied. A Taiwanese King Sonic about the size of a fruit bowl, with a black velvet face. Something up my nose had been bothering me for about 2 years before I decided to have it seen to. When they flipped the old pal over, they could see the beginnings of the thing glistening there. Biscuit, Howard? Help yourself. There are fewer bathrooms to clean over at Peaceful Hills, and the kitchen smaller. That's all very well, but the man doesn't have a rent-free flat and a basement for storage, does he? Have you ever had an operation, Howard? You know, they never did identify what they pulled out, no. The surgeon said they'd never seen anything like it. Grown, yes, and went on and on, yes. Right round the back of my skull. Imagine that. I've been working here for 4 years with hardly any sick leave, Mr. Dagmore. Instead of numbers, the Dag's clock had alternate pink and red cloth roses with a little sequin on each, like a drop of dew. A great mass of unidentifiable material, pulled out with the utmost concentration, centimetre by centimetre, amounted to the volume of 6 eggs, apparently, and weighed in at several ounces. What do you think of that? Before you answer, Howard, I can tell you categorically, there will be no rise. What are you staring at? The best thing of all was that on the tip of the second hand, a white butterfly hovered, and if the clock had been working, it would have juddered from one roast to the next, supping the dew throughout the whole dreary livelong working day. Can I go now, Mr. Dagmore? Yes, go! For God's sake! Miserable boy. Unbelievable cheek. A few days later, while I was spring cleaning the kitchen, I had the tiniest sense of something not right on the floor, just on the edge of my vision. The following afternoon, when the olds were settled in front of the TV watching the kiddies' programmes, I slipped back in there and peeped under the stove. I went straight to Dagmore's office, and there he was as expected, busy with a plate of biscuits, his legs stretched out in front of him, bony ankles crossed. "Mr. Dagmore, there's cockroaches in the kitchen." What? Cockroaches? Pull the other one, Howard," he spat. "I saw them the other day, and again just now." "How many?" "I didn't count them." "1, 2, what?" "Does it matter? They're there." Are you on drugs, boy? Been to the discotheque? Is it popping pills?" A gob of spit abseiled down his tie. "Okay," I shrugged. "Just the fruitfulness of my imagination. Fine by me." On Sunday, during bingo, that was the one time Dagmore does something for the olds, I went back to the kitchen with a jam jar and got a few of them for proof. I could hear his thin voice doing the calling. "Number 11, soon in heaven." He made them up. Things like number 8, no food on your plate. Or number 4, "You old bore." His worst was 25, "You still alive?" 25, "You still alive?" If anyone had 25, they'd have to look up at Dagmore's question and nod vigorously. He was calling number 84 as I appeared at the dining room door. He looked up quickly and waved his arms at me. "What are you mithering about now, Howard? Bugger off and clean the stairs again, You simpleton. My God, people you have to work with. Wait. Number 84? An old bed sore." I took the jar down to the basement. It was silent down there, except for the gentle hum of the old boiler and the muffled sound of voices on the street. I sat in the gloom for a while and inspected the contents of the jar. The 6 fellas in there looked lively, climbing all over each other's backs with a furious energy. They were flat and light brown. Germans, I realised. I made up a little rhyme as I watched them. 21, good job done. 54, what's behind the door? Number 7, cockroach heaven. 28, they've had the food off your plate. 66, I got my kicks. Number 1, there's more to come. I've been fascinated by insects for as long as I can remember. When I was a boy, romantic insects like butterflies or lacewings were only of passing interest. I had an inclination towards machine-like creatures, and as I grew more adept at catching them, I began to move from species to species like there was no tomorrow. Around the age of 7, I had an obsessive relationship with weevils. The more handsome was the snout of a particular species of weevil, the more I liked it. In particular, I was taken with Leparus coronatus. My father first introduced me to it in his carrot patch. "Nasty little chap this. Put your foot on it, Howard." It had lovely yellow scales and a chunky snout, but I began to consider weevils stodgy after a while and lost interest in them completely when I noticed that Mr. Symes in the grocery shop, who'd wrongly accused me of stealing, looked like one. Berrien and rove beetles were big favourites. Nicrophorus humator, shiny black like a hearse, with subtle orange tips to its antennae, was the most dignified of the berriers. But my few encounters with the devil's coach horse were sublime. Staphylinidae olens he is, a hunter of slugs, and a marvellous thing it is the way he opens his jaws and flicks up the end of his body at the slightest provocation. But as a kid, I'd never engaged with cockroaches, even though for a short while the pet shop had been selling the Madagascan hissing roach, a blackish-brown fella, bigger than a saucer. Anyway, 2 years passed, and events took a fortunate turn. Dagmore was doing Alice's sleepovers. She'd handed in her notice after he'd pinned her against the porch wall with his breath and knees one too many times. I was sorry to see her leave and bought her a card. There was a pearl of a tear in one of her tiny eyes. "You be all right, Howard," she sobbed. "How you going to get the slops now?" "No worries, Alice. The Dag says I'm to clean tables when you've gone." She looked at me once more and shook her head slowly. "I don't know where you put all that food, you're that thin." I began to coach up Grandad, but getting him to tune in was difficult. "I'm leaving here next week, Grandad," I shouted at him. He heard me. "Oh, found a new job?" "Going travelling. See a bit of the world, you know." "Having a party before you go?" I got up close to his ear. "No, Grandad. Just sliding out into the night." "Wine, women and song, eh?" "Yeah, I wondered if you'd like to come with me." "Go as well, you say?" "I'll be heading for the coast." "Leave White Lawns?" "Next week, and you could come too." "Leave? And not come back?" It took a long time for the idea to sink in, but when it did, he was really fired up. I'd see him in the dining room watching out for me. He'd wink in an exaggerated manner and tap his finger on the side of his nose. The staff decided it was a new manifestation of his increasing senility. Well, when D-Day came, he'd forgotten, and I had to go through the whole thing again. I had everything worked out to the last detail, and I was afraid we'd miss the bus if he wouldn't do what I wanted. "Get your cardio on, Grandad, it's time to go." "Go? Breakfast time already, Howard?" "We're going travelling, remember?" "Party time," he said, and circled his room with his arms wrapped around his body as if he was in a ballroom. "Be quiet, Grandad, for God's sake." "Party's not going yet, my boy. If you think this is noisy, wait till the gramophone starts up." I sat the old man in the porch with our bags. He was as alert and as ready to go as he would ever be. He'd put on a jaunty cravat and had a look of faded triumph in his eyes that quite choked me up. I'd chosen him because he had a good steady walk and was the most dauntless of the olds at White Lawns. "Wait for me here, Grandad. I've forgotten something, all right?" "Don't be long, boy. The party's going to start." I let myself into my flat and walked quickly down to the basement. The wire gauze on the gigantic cage was alive with movement. Only one of the 6 original cockroaches had been holding an egg sac when I caught them, but I'd done my calculations. A female is mature within 3 months, and over her 6-month lifespan can nurse and deposit up to 8 egg cases, containing around 40 eggs each. I made the assumption that half of the hatchlings was females, so that the young female I caught with her first egg case delivered around 20 more females that were caring for their own egg cases within 3 months. These 20 had produced around 400 new females by April last year, and then after that the numbers began expanding into Fantasyland. So in 24 months, with a decent environment and plenty of food, my estimation of the brood was much more than 3 million. In fact, my maths wasn't up to the number of noughts involved. I plied up the corner of the gauze swiftly as I could, and then ran as if all the poodles of hell were behind me, and some. I remember one writhing dense mass, a wall of golden brown, and the delicate skittering sound of kiting, wing on wing, leg on leg. They were right behind me as I bolted for the porch to grab at Grandad's hand, a dense swarm like a swelling brown river with sunlight on it that spread and slithered and came together under some mysterious directive not known to humans. I've kept all the cuttings from the newspapers. An area of half a square mile around White Lawns was evacuated, and the place had to be burnt down in a controlled fire. The olds had their clothes taken away and burnt. They were bussed out of the area and spent the night in a village hall set up for the purpose. Dagmore isn't mentioned much. He was relieved of his job and sent off to trauma counselling so he could relive the horror over and over again endlessly, and that's particularly satisfying to me. I'm watching Grandad now, dancing on the beach. He's beginning to tire me out with his energy. He's become so animated and ruddy-faced. Everybody assumes he wandered off by himself in the confusion of that night, and his family, the plumbers, who never visited him when he was at White Lawns, had popped up from nowhere and are looking all sad and frantic on the front page of the newspapers. I'm wondering if it's time for us to split up and try our luck separately. I've a feeling I could make a bolt for it to France and maybe do fruit picking down south. He'd be all right here by himself. Someone would find him and hand him into the council eventually. But it's a hard decision. Not because I like the old man, but if it comes to a shootout with the police, he's my only bargaining tool. There'll be all these glaring lights and helicopters and the wailing of sirens going on all through the night. Police dogs will be barking, and I'll stand behind Grandad Plumber and thrust him forward very roughly, saying, "Keep back, you bastards, or the old man gets it." And then I'll demand a hot meal, a bag full of money, and a private jet to take Grandad and me to a little Taiwanese island where nobody works and nobody can count for toffee. And I'll get a King Sonic. Yeah, that's what I'd do, all right. Today's story was Howard's Friends by Rebecca Lloyd. Well, it was read by me, Jasper L'Estrange, and I do hope you enjoyed it. And so, until next time, sweet dreams.